Hey, did you ever reach a point in your life where you said to yourself, I want to write a book? Well, sometimes there's things in our life that get us to feel that way, to feel that all the experiences and things that we're seeing around us are worth writing about. Well, our next author exactly went through that. And we're going to meet a very interesting person. My name is Vincent Dacquino, and our guest is David Carraturo. David,
good. How are
welcome,
you?
And let's talk writing.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Very good, very good.
David, a pleasure to have you here. And we want to know a little bit about you. Talk to me about all of this. Who are you, and what do you do?
Well, I am not a professional writer. In fact,
okay. Well,
if you ask my family and friends, they would say, I didn't even know you can read, let alone write. But I've been, I'd say I'm your typical suburban dad. Wife, 3 kids, dog. I've worked for in the Wall Street community for the past 25, 26 years.
The Wall Street community?
Yes.
Wow. So, and out of all of that came these 2 award-winning books. So, yes, you are a professional writer, and you've written 2 great books. Where did Wall Street and these books come together? When did you suddenly say, I'm going to write a book?
Well, as I said before, I joked that people didn't even realize I can read, let alone write. But I'd say for my whole life, I've read a lot. I've always been a voracious reader of novels. I love all types of.
You have a favorite author?
I have a number of favorite authors. On the fiction side, I love Tom Clancy and John Jakes. I like historical fiction, and I like also detailed stories. And on the nonfiction side, I'm a big fan of World War II type books. So Stephen Ambrose, James Bradley are 2 of my favorite writers.
New writers often say to me, where do your characters come from? Where do your characters come from? Are these real people?
They are not real people for the most part, and people come to me and they say, well, you're writing about this particular person, and I'm not. I'm writing about a compilation of people that I know and stories that I've read or written, and also just experiences that I've had. I really consider myself the ultimate townie. I grew up in Tuckahoe, okay. Lower Westchester, and there's a tremendous amount of local history in that community, and that's besides my family life and having good, strong family experiences. My family has been a part of the Tuckahoe community for about 100 years now. So wow. I feel really just as the ultimate townie. I love the area. There's a lot of history there, and I build off of that in both of my stories.
So your setting for Cameron Nation is kind of based on Tuckahoe. I mean, from what you saw of family structure, neighborhood structure, school. I know that Tuckahoe is quite an interesting place. Now, the characters in the story and the storyline, that isn't actually Tuckahoe.
No.
So that's fictitious.
Yes.
But this book, Cameron Nation, is a combination of fiction and real life.
Well, it is a fictional story with a lot of research and facts behind it. However, what I've done is the seed of the entire story, Chris Cameron, all the main characters in the story are taken from either my life, people that I know, stories that I've found of interest.
So you've combined all of those stories. Mm-hmm. I know exactly what you're talking about, because for Kiss the Candy Days Goodbye, one of the things that I did is it's a story of a young boy with diabetes. But the young boy is a combination of me, combination of my mother, coaches, myself as a coach, and as I tried to portray what it's like to grow up with diabetes, I've never had diabetes, I also tried to show what it's like to grow up as me. Some of the things that I've noticed on how people act, what makes them laugh, what makes them cry, the pains, the joys of life. This book is filled with pains and joys and all kinds of ups and downs. Your main characters, now your main character sort of rotates. Your point of view isn't the same throughout the book. Talk to me a little bit about that.
For Cameron Nation, the main character and the point of view is pretty much via Chris Cameron. For Columbus Avenue Boys,
that switches
around, where there is a number of key main characters, and I wanted to put different chapters from their point of view. I didn't want to confuse the reader.
Right.
Each chapter would be written via their point of view.
So you don't switch point of view in the middle of a character, chapter?
No.
Oh, that's good. That's good, because you're right, that is confusing. I work with a number of young adult readers, and that becomes a problem. So that's good to know. So tell me, roughly, what is this book about? What is Cameron Nation actually about?
Okay. Well, I think it's pretty good timing now, as it is October of 2012. Probably the spark of this book came about from a political standpoint in the fall of 2008, where I was very frustrated and upset with what was going on politically in our country.
Gee, you think?
And I did not believe that Barack Obama was the choice. However, I also knew that Republicans had everything in the palm of their hands after the 2004 election, and they blew it. So if you look at the cover of Cameron Nation, it's the American eagle playing poker against the Democratic donkey and the Republican elephant. So it's the American country being frustrated with both political parties. So I wanted to create the perfect political character, a Teflon president that can work with both houses of Congress, both political parties and both houses of Congress, to restore our country to its greatness. Now, the day after the election, I happened to have flown down to Dallas for meetings with clients, and there was outright fear in their eyes. Wow. They did not like what was transpiring. They did not like the results of the election, and they knew things were going to get bad. And from there, the seed started to grow. And over the next year, I spoke with a colleague of mine at work. We would go back and forth with political discussions, and I was very upset with what was going on. And he said, well, why don't you write a book? And from say 2002 on, I started reading more about politics in addition to what I had read about other areas. But politics became my main thrust of focus. And I just created this character in my mind, Chris Cameron. And Cameron Nation is actually a play on the word condemnation. So
okay.
Chris Cameron became my character, and I thought, well, let me create the greatest president for our future.
Can you bring him here? We need that guy. What makes up the greatest president of our time?
Well, first, he has to have the same political beliefs as me.
Okay.
But what I did was I did a lot of research for the story. And I found that in the last 100+ years, there has never been a time in in Washington where Republicans have had a supermajority. And by supermajority, I would say 60+ senators, a strong majority in the House, and a Republican president. We've always had the opposite. We've had Democrats with supermajorities during the New Deal. I believe Bill Clinton might have had it in the 90s for a short period of time. But we've never had a time where Republicans had supermajority. So you can almost say this book is science fiction because it's never happened,
it never happened.
and it may never happen.
Right.
But I decided to take it a step further and say, if this does happen, what can change for our country to make it better? So I would preface this by saying this is not for the liberal mind. This is a my conservative manifesto, and it has very strong Tea Party beliefs, but it's also very based on a lot of basic blocking and tackling that our country has done for the last 200 years. Exploiting our energy reserves, lowering our tax code, really letting private enterprise and philanthropy get us out of the mess that we're in.
So here we have the ideal president, which we probably may never see. This book is getting a lot of attention.
I've had good reviews by people who have read it, and what's nice
Even
is
Kirkus.
that Kirkus, the great reviews, Midwest and Kirkus reviews, iUniverse Review Board, Hollywood Book Festival have all acknowledged Columbus Avenue Boys as really a very special story.
Wow. Wow.
Camera Nation, though, has had very strong reviews from the community, people that want to read political stories. And what I find encouraging about the story is that, number one, people in the Midwest are reading it and liking it, and those are the swing states.
Yeah.
So those are the people that have to be more informed. But also, what I found was the best compliment that I've had for the book was by a reader who said, I've learned more about politics and economics from reading your book. It was a very entertaining story, but I've learned more about economics and politics by reading your book than I did in 4 years of college.
Now, you are not a politician by nature.
No.
But you obviously feel very strongly about politics. Where does your information come from? I mean, what do you read?
It's an eclectic list of areas that I get my information from. First, I combine, in my thinking, economics and politics.
Okay.
Because I think you have to.
Oh, yeah.
So, as I said, I've worked in the Wall Street community since 1986, and I've been very lucky and very fortunate to work with people that are light years smarter than me. And while I don't, I'm not up to their level in terms of intelligence, I absorb and I listen to everything that they've been saying. So I've dealt with, and I've been around some of the, the smartest people around. You're talking, I've marketed with Arthur Laffer, who was on Ronald Reagan's he was Ronald Reagan's economic advisor in the 80s, and he's the father of the Laffer curve, which is a supply side economic doctrine. I've dealt with a lot of very smart economists, analysts. I had a very strong relationship with a firm that did the highest quality oil and gas research. So you bring these people around to very smart investors and listen to their dialogue and just listen to what they're saying about, how do we exploit energy reserves? What happens if this political party is in place? What can happen if we lower taxes? And I just absorb all these things, and everything, from a conservative supply side mindset made sense to me. And on top of that, you have just the internet at your fingertips, where you can read everything that you ever wanted to about every single subject matter.
Yeah. So your economic background plays a big role in this book.
Yes.
And I'm sure politically you hear an awful lot on Wall Street about what needs to be in our government to make our government work. And right now, of course, that's a major issue in this next election. All right, so Camera Nation comes out, and you make the points that you need to make about government. And then when it's done, you make a big decision that there has to be another book. But you don't move forward, you move back. Because Columbus Avenue Boys is actually a prequel to this book. Talk to me about Columbus Avenue Boys.
Okay, well,
let's hold that up.
For Columbus Avenue Boys, it was really a story that came about as I was developing Camera Nation. So Chris Cameron, who's one of the Columbus Avenue Boys, he has two best friends, Sal Esposito and Tony Albanese. And as Camera Nation is being written, they were very minor characters. By the second and third parts of the book, though, they became more pronounced in character development. So as I'm writing their characters and their storylines and the chapters that they were in, I found myself very excited about writing those chapters. So I made a decision fairly early on in the second into the third part that I had to write a story about those two characters. And here's Chris Cameron, who is the straight-laced guy who was very much best friends with these two characters. He goes off to college, makes a name of himself. His two best friends stay back in Tuggo. And they're knockaround guys. They're in organized crime. So you have a correlation to saying that JFK may have had mob influence. So I try to have seeds of past events. So JFK may have had mob influence. Well, I'm going to have my character with some sort of mob influence, but to be above the fray. So Columbus Avenue Boys cleans up Sal and Tony's past and really shows that Chris Cameron is a do-gooder.
Okay. So he sort of straightens them out?
Yes, Chris
and
Cameron
brings them out of organized crime.
Yes, so in Columbus Avenue Boys, it started out as strictly a mob infiltration. So you have the FBI infiltrating the mob via Sal and Tony at the direction of Chris's master plan. However, very early on in writing that story, I decided that that was too one-dimensional, and I wanted to make it more of a family saga. So rather than have it strictly take place in the 1990s, I took Sal, Tony, and Chris's heritage and their ancestors, and I brought them back to the 1860s. And they're not just best friends, but they're distant relatives from relatives that came to this country in the 1880s and 1890s from Italy. And I had them grow in town and around the New York area from the turn of the century. The families had a lot of heartache and turmoil in the 1930s. And the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, the family rebuilt itself. And you really get a sense of why these three Columbus Avenue boys are as close as they are.
Now, you have a family tree in here. Tell me about that family tree. What is that family tree about?
Well, there's actually multiple family trees because there were so many characters at the beginning of the book, whereas I had 5 Scalamari brothers come to town, come to this country, and I decided I had to make them, I had to give the reader more to chew on. So I had the 5 brothers come in, and then like with any family tree, you have a brother and a sister are born, and then they get married, and so the Scalamari family, how do 3 Columbus Avenue boys with the name Cameron, Albanese, and Esposito come from 5 Scalamari brothers? So I tie the knots, and I really go through the family trees from the 1860s up till the 1990s. And what was nice here in this book is I needed a lot of Italian names. I have a lot of Italian friends and relatives. I made sure everyone was represented in that family tree.
Wow. So, of course, the family tree is fabricated, but it does give it that sense of real story, real life. So here's a question. Is there a happy ending to this story?
There is a happy ending to both stories.
Oh.
So, as we said, the basis of this story was Sal, Chris, and Tony. Sal and Tony getting out of the mob in a clean fashion. But the underlying story, and the one where I'm getting the most praise from or great feedback, is the grandfather of Tony Albanese, Vincent Scala. So he's a Scalamari relative, and Vincent Scala was actually the murderer of Bugsy Siegel.
Whoa.
So I took writer's liberty with that.
Yeah, a little bit.
And Bugsy
Siegel.
Siegel.
The Siegel family gets a hold of you. No.
In the 1930s, Bugsy Siegel murdered the entire Scalamari family.
Yeah, wow.
So in a Sunday night massacre in Tuckahoe.
So it's sort of like a get him back.
No, so Vincent decides he, as a sole survivor, he's getting them back.
Wow.
So he gets them back. After Bugsy Siegel and all the loose ends are tied up, he leaves the past in the past, and he decides, and this is now the post-war years, to rebuild the family.
Wow.
And rebuilding the family
now,
in a baby boomer
family or the family?
No, the family.
The family.
He is a straight-laced guy, Vincent Scala.
Good.
So he becomes, whereas in Cameron Nation, yes, I felt I wanted to be Chris Cameron. As I'm writing Columbus Avenue Boys, I want to be Vincent Scala.
There you go.
So I take his life from 16 years old up till 75 years old.
Wow.
So it's basically the story of his life through his eyes and also through the Columbus Avenue Boys' eyes. So it's 2 stories with flashbacks and 2 different storylines.
Now, this, Columbus Avenue Boys, is one that really got a lot of attention. Yes. So what did Kirkus say about Columbus Avenue Boys?
Highly recommended read. Has a very authentic organized crime feel. They like the dialogue, they like the storylines, and again, they felt that it was a story that you savor.
That's
so
great.
You savor this family I've had readers also that have given me reviews that just said, I wanted to read this book slow because I wanted to savor the family dynamics and just read more about this family. And I'm just
that's
taken
it.
back by
Kirkus is tough. They're tough. I remember when Kiss the Candy Days came out, in the Kirkus review, it said, a cut above others of its kind. And my publisher said, oh my God, that's Kirkus. Kirkus said that. That's wonderful. Because they're tough. They're tough. So this is getting some real good reviews. People are loving your writing. And despite the fact that you say you're not a professional writer, oh, you are. Now, here's a question. Writers have profiles. It means they have characteristics that make them the writers that they are. What makes up David Carraturo? When do you write? Why do you write? How do you write? Do you write in bed? Do you write in the kitchen table? In your research? I know a book like this takes a lot of research. So talk to me about your profile as a writer. How, when, where do you write?
Well, my writing is very compartmentalized and systematic. I know I basically do an outline, and I know that it's going to be 30 plus chapters or 20 or so plus chapters, and I don't get too far ahead of myself. I'll write one chapter a week. So, but with that one chapter, which may only take me 2 days or so to actually write the draft of it, the research behind it is the key. And I try to do as much research on the catalyst of the story. And then from there, the idea for the story will just flow. But the actual writing process for the book, which both of them took me 9 months or so to write, and then another 6 to 9 months to edit.
Right.
But the actual writing, I am totally engulfed in the story. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If I'm talking to you, if I'm walking down the street,
your brain is in the book.
I'm in the book. I'm nowhere else. That's all I'm doing. And I feel that as a writer, you need that sort of commitment. You can't just be in it halfway.
When I first got married, I was very much ensconced in my books. And my mother-in-law, I would go there for a party, a holiday, and she'd look at me and she'd say, hello, are you in there? Truth? No, I wasn't in there. I was in there. And that's what happens. You know, your characters take over and your stories take over. So you do dedicate a certain block of time to it? I mean, do you shut the door in your room? Do you...
Well, you know,
how can you do that in work?
Traveling back and forth to the city on the train. Usually do a little editing on the train, try to get a outline for a chapter. If I've got it, as I'm walking back and forth to the train, I'll think about it and then just write some notes and then go downstairs and write. And as I said, it only takes, once you have the idea for the writing, for the actual chapter, for me, it only 6,000 words, 7,000 words would only take anywhere from a day or two to write. It's the editing and the backfilling and dotting the I's, crossing the T's, syncing up the timeline, syncing up all the facts. That is more of the grunt work, which is the most time consuming. So if I write a chapter, like say I'm 6 weeks in and I've written my 6th chapter, I will then, after the 6th chapter, go back to chapter 1 and read all 6 again. One
of the things that writers often discovered is that writing isn't as difficult as rewriting. Is that what you find?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to go back and read it again and again. One of my golden rules is that after you write page 1, you need to write the last page of the book before you can really write page 1. Then you have to go back with all of that knowledge. When you first start the book, you don't know where it's going to go, and it kind of takes its own path. Yeah. So after that path and after you know where it truly ends, then you go back to the beginning and you work it and rework it. Yeah, it's not writing a book, it's working a book. Yeah. True?
Yes, and I'd say that's a good example with Camera Nation, where I wrote the entire story and I came to the end and we found out, I wrote the entire story with the assumption that no one knew who Chris Cameron was. He wasn't going to be president yet. You just had a story build up of why are we reading about this guy? But it's a very interesting story, and I am learning a lot about politics and history and where our country needs to go. But why am I reading about him? And then I put in the last chapter that he became president. So it just didn't work for me, having that suspense build up.
Right.
So what I did was I moved the last chapter to the first chapter.
Yep.
And then you know from the start that he's going to be the greatest president ever, and then it kicks off and you... So chapter 1 became chapter 2, and chapter 34 became chapter 1.
I hear you. Now, so we have Cameron Nation. We have a prequel. We looking at a sequel?
There are a few ideas I have for additional books. I've got my sequel to Cameron Nation, assuming that the election goes the way I hope.
Yeah.
If it does not go,
we wouldn't even go there.
If it doesn't, then and where I'm more drawn towards actually is a prequel sequel to Columbus Avenue Boys, because I have time periods in both books. So in Cameron Nation there was a time period which was glossed over, the 1996 to 1999 time period. And what I did was I filled that in with Columbus Avenue Boys. So that whole time period that's glossed over in Cameron Nation is filled in completely with Columbus Avenue Boys. Now there's also a part of Columbus Avenue Boys which was glossed over, which was the post-war years, the 1947 to 1982 time period, which includes not only the Columbus Avenue Boys, but Vincent Scala and the other members of the extended Scalamari family.
So we haven't heard the end of David Carraturo, have we?
No, I enjoy writing historical fiction. I enjoy writing, I enjoy educating. I enjoy writing about my town. I love these characters, and I want to continue writing with them. One of the things where I actually gave a brief talk to the 7th grade class at Eastchester High School, which I attended, and I thought it was really nice going back there. And they read parts of Columbus Avenue Boys, and I gave them parts of a chapter, and then they filled out the rest of the chapter on their own. But
I'm sure they enjoyed you.
Yeah,
and you can be assured that we enjoyed having you here. David, I can't thank you enough for joining us. Read Cameron Nation. Read Columbus Avenue Boys. Look for upcoming books by David Carraturo. And by all means, stay tuned to this channel for more of Let's Talk Writing. David, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
What a pleasure.